back with your next class. In today's class, we are going to start with major abiotic factors, which we have discussed a little bit of introduction in the last class itself. You know very well we are going to discuss under this section 4 major abiotic factors, that is temperature, light, water and soil. So let's start with temperature. So first of all, temperature, mark here, it's the most ecologically relevant environmental factor. Sometimes a question may be asked that which is the most important environmental factor. Okay, 4 options would be given like temperature, water, wind and soil. Okay, so which one will you choose? You will sometimes you might get confused that all of them are equally important, but then do remember temperature is regarded the most ecologically relevant factor. Okay. Average temperature on land rises seasonally, decreases progressively from equator towards pole. So it is maximum in the equator and slowly it will keep reducing as we move towards poles, or it is going to reduce from plains to the mountain tops. It ranges from sub-zero levels in the polar areas and exceeds to 100 degrees in the thermal springs where thermophiles are present. Thermo means heat, phili means to love. So all those organisms are mainly the microbes which you have learned in the biological classification, the thermoacidophiles, isn't it? So these are the organisms. They will be found in very high range of temperature. Alright. Next. It has a great impact on distribution of organism. Of course, accordingly from equator towards pole, as the temperature will keep on reducing, accordingly the vegetation, or rather we can say the flora and fauna or the distribution of plants and animals will also keep on varying, isn't it? Like in equator we'll have maximum types of flora and fauna present as temperature is going to be optimum, and as you keep on moving towards pole the temperature will keep on decreasing. In that case the biodiversity will also keep on reducing. So it will have a direct impact on the distribution of the organism, and that is very, very obvious. Next, it also affects the enzyme kinetics. So now we are going to the cellular level. Okay, in the very cellular level itself, temperature plays a very important role because it will be affecting our enzyme kinetics and the basal metabolism and other physiological functions in organism. Okay, so because of these reasons, temperature is the most important and the most relevant ecological abiotic factor. Now let us discuss a few types of organisms based on temperature. Now we have 3 different bases to discuss here. First is the thermal tolerance. According to how much of temperature can be tolerated by an organism, we can divide the organisms into 2 categories, stenothermal and eurythermal. Alright, stenothermal means those organisms which are found in a habitat where temperature remains uniform throughout the year. That means they cannot tolerate wide range of temperature. They can be only found in narrow range of temperature. If temperature goes beyond a particular range, they cannot tolerate and they would simply not be able to survive. For example, polar bears or lizard, abees, etc. Alright. On the other hand, eurythermal. Eurythermal will be exact opposite. Eurythermal means organisms which will be able to tolerate wide range of temperature. So they will be able to go through wide variations in the temperature. Like for example, most mammals and birds. Alright. Now, moving to the next category is ectotherms and endotherms. It is based on homeostasis. That means whether the organism is able to maintain internal steady state or not. So ectotherms means the organisms which do not maintain homeostasis. They are also known as poikilotherms or cold-blooded organisms. Okay, so they won't be able to maintain the internal steady state, and the temperature inside their body will keep changing according to the outer environment. Like this is going to be very commonly found in most plants, okay, in various types of animals as well, but in plants this is what is going to be mostly happening. Next is endotherms. Endotherms means organism which can maintain homeostasis, means they can be also termed as Homeotherms or warm-blooded organisms means they can maintain their internal steady state and the temperature inside their body would remain constant no matter whatever changes are happening in the outer environment. This is going to happen in most birds and mammals. Finally, we move to the third and the last category. This category is based on 4 temperature groups. Okay, so how you will remember this is not by mugging up or anything, just try remembering this sequence: megatherm, mesotherm, microtherm and hekistotherm. So as you move down here from megatherm towards hekistotherm, what is actually happening is, suppose this is towards the equator, and as you move here, you are moving towards pole. So that means megatherms will be found in maximum temperature, that means in the tropical zone. Then little bit further, if you move towards pole, you will get the mesotherms in the subtropical zone. A bit more towards the pole, if you move, you get microtherms, that is in the temperate zone, and hekistotherm, which you will be finding in the extreme, towards the pole, that is the Arctic zone. Okay, so what you have to be remembering here is that from megatherm towards hekistotherm, if you move, temperature would gradually reduce. Temperature would gradually reduce. Okay, so what would be the definition then? See, megatherms. Now megatherms, they are mainly going to be found in the tropical zone where temperature would be optimum and it would remain uniform throughout the year. Okay, that means temperature will be high and it would be maintained. Okay. Next, mesotherm. Now mesotherm are found in subtropical zone. It is known for having mild temperature in the winter and high summer temperature. Mild winters and high summer temperature. That's what in the subtropical zone. Next, microtherms. Here the winter temperature would be low and the summer temperature would be moderate. Okay. And last, hekistotherm. About hekistotherm, the summer here will be having the temperature of around 10 degrees. The summer itself is 10 degrees and of course there will be a long snowy winter period. So as you have moved towards Arctic zone, of course temperature is the minimum. So in that case summer itself is going to be very mild, brief with a temperature of 10 degrees and long snowy winter period will be present. So these are the 4 major temperature groups. Do remember the sequence: megatherm, mesotherm, microtherm and hekistotherm. Alright, so that is regarding the temperature. Next, let us move on to light. So first of all, what is light? So we are referring here the visible spectrum of light where the wavelength range would be around 390 to 760 nanometer. Okay, so it is the visible part of the electromagnetic spectrum with the wavelength range of 390 to 760 nanometer. Alright. Also, you must be remembering from the chapter photosynthesis that even if the visible light is 390 to 760 nanometer, in this range again, there is a specific range in which the plants can conduct photosynthesis. Okay, that is 400 to 700 nanometer. Hence, we call this part to be PAR, photosynthetically active radiation. Alright. Now, the range below visible light will be UV and above it, wavelength that would be above further to visible light would be infrared. Okay. Now we have to discuss here the various types of light dependency seen in the various organisms like plants, animals or decomposers. See here first, importance of light for plants. See, depending on the requirement of light intensity, mark here, we are talking about light intensity for plants. We can categorize the plants into 2 divisions. One is heliophytes, another is sciophytes. Heliophytes are sun plants, so they would require high light intensity to function or to photosynthesize, whereas sciophytes are shade plants. They would be only found in area where light intensity will be lower. Okay, for example, you can say pteridophytes. Okay, they would be only found in shady areas, or bryophytes. So they are all sciophytes. Whereas the gymnosperms and angiosperms, they would fall under heliophytes. Now, Also, many plants depend on light for photoperiodic requirements. Okay, so you remember photoperiodism, I think that photoperiodism means how in certain of the plants flowering process is initiated only after a specific light period is provided to them. That we call as the photoperiodic response, isn't it? So light in certain plants will also be inducing flowering. That's how light is going to be important for flowering as well. Finally, it also impacts growth, reproduction, movements and phenology in plants. Alright? Phenology means the study of cyclic changes with response to plants or animals and the climate. Okay? So that is how the plants are going to be affected by the amount of light or by the intensity of light that they receive. Next, moving on to importance of light for animals. Okay? See, many animals use the diurnal and seasonal variation. That means diurnal means the day and night. This changes. Okay? Diurnal or seasonal variation in light intensity and duration for timing of foraging. That means when they go in search for food, reproductive and migratory activities. Alright? Now, finally, importance of light for decomposers. Now, even if we can see some direct and obvious relation with light in plants and animals, and it's very easy to understand. See, in oceans mainly, there are various, layers present, right? So, say deep in the ocean, say more than 50 meters in depth, this area is going to show perpetual darkness, complete darkness, right? So when there is complete darkness, so in that complete darkness, mostly certain organisms like decomposers would be found in that area, in such regions or area, isn't it? So these organisms on the other hand, they do not have any kind of, idea regarding the sun. So how do they survive then? They would of course then survive by taking up nourishment or nutrients from the producers who are found in upper light regime of the ocean. Alright, so let's see this. Light availability is closely linked to temperature. Deep in the ocean, that is around 500 meter, it is completely dark and the inhabitants are not aware of the sun. So they depend on the producers found in the ocean, and mainly they are going to depend on the producers found in the upper light regime of the ocean. Okay. So next let us discuss how the spectral quality of light can also be deciding or having a very important impact or effect on the life cycle of certain organisms. Alright. See, spectral quality of solar radiation is also important for life. How? See, there is this component of electromagnetic radiation which we call UV, ultraviolet radiation, isn't it? So ultraviolet component of the spectrum is harmful to many organisms and are of three types. According to their wavelength range, UV can again be divided into three distinct parts. Okay, UVC, UVB and UVA. UVC has the wavelength range of 100 to 280 nanometer and it's lethal. That means it will kill the organism whoever is exposed to it. Next, UVB, it has the wavelength range of 280 to 320 nanometer and it is also very harmful. Finally comes the UVA, which has the wavelength range which is closer to the visible light, that is 320 to 400 nanometer, and it is moderately harmful. Okay. So see, UVC and UVB are absorbed by the ozone layer of stratosphere, so it does not reach us. Okay, and thank God for that, right? Because they were very, very harmful. On the other hand, UVA, it reaches finally to us, but that too in very small quantity. Alright, because of the ozone layer, even UVA, it reaches us, but in a very small quantity. But even then, because of certain kind of, environmental, pollution that are being caused so far, there is ozone hole that is being created. And because of that, UV radiations are able to reach us now to a large extent. That is again causing various types of diseases. We'll discuss that in further details in other chapters. Another important phenomena, apart from UV, that is also going to be, dependent on the spectral quality of light, and that is chromatic adaptation. So what is chromatic adaptation? See, marine plants living at different depths of the ocean do not receive all the color components of visible light. Now you know very well visible light can be again divided into different parts, isn't it? That we call as VIBGYOR according to the differential color that they possess, right? So 7 different colors that are present in the visible light, and they are not present equally at every depth in the ocean. So different plants that are found in differential depth in the ocean will be able to change color according to what kind of, which particular color of visible light they are receiving. Okay. So algae and blue-green algae, BGA, that is cyanobacteria, they can change their color according to the different depth in the ocean. Why? Because they are receiving different colors of visible light, and this is known as chromatic adaptation. Understood this? Algae and cyanobacteria will be able to change their color according to what kind of depth they are present in the ocean, because different depths will receive different colors of visible light. That's what is called chromatic adaptation. Like for example, red algae, it is found in the deepest zone at the maximum depth. Why? Because red algae will be able to absorb the blue-green light which penetrates the furthest. Okay, that's why it will absorb blue-green light and it will reflect the red color, and hence it will appear to be red. On the other hand, green algae, it will be mostly absorbing red light. Red light has the least penetration, so it will be found in shallow zone, and that's why the algae which will be absorbing red color, it will be emitting the green light. So green algae will be found in the shallow zone. Likewise, brown algae will be absorbing from the mid-range of the visible spectrum, hence it will be found in the intermediate zone. Okay, so I think all of you are clear about it, how spectral quality of light can also decide various important factors in case of plants. Alright, so now let us discuss regarding light zonation of lake. Here you will be able to learn that how different parts of the lake is going to possess or is going to receive different intensity of light, and hence it will give rise to various zonation in the lake. Okay, so let's start. First of all, see, this being the land and this being the water, that means pond. Okay, so if we mark it as such, this is one zone which is showing an intermingle between the terrestrial and aquatic habitat, isn't it? As if some organisms from land will also be present here and some organisms of the water will also be present here, right? Also, this zone is going to receive a lot of light intensity or maximum sunlight. So because of that, this zone, which is called the littoral zone, will be highly productive. Okay, it will show wave action and will be the most productive part in the lake. Okay, see here, littoral zone exposed to wave action and is highly productive. Alright. Next, coming to the next zone in the lake is the limnatic zone. Limnatic zone is again the uppermost layer of the pond itself, but away from the littoral zone. Okay, here organisms will be mostly from the aquatic ecosystem. So here mostly the phytoplanktons will be present as it is receiving so much of light intensity, isn't it? So that's why here phytoplanktons will be maximum found, and it will be also highly productive because photosynthesis will be occurring at a very high rate. See, limnatic zone, open water body rich in phytoplanktons. Alright. Next, coming to euphotic zone. So just below the limnatic zone, we have euphotic zone. See, euphotic zone, it receives maximum light above the light compensation point. Now your question would be, what is light compensation point? It is a point in the light curve when the rate of photosynthesis becomes equal to the rate of cellular respiration. Okay, so it is a intermediate. Okay, light compensation point is like the intermediate point. Okay, so above light compensation point, the light intensity is going to be good enough for photosynthesis, and below compensation point, the photosynthetic capacity would reduce and the light intensity becomes very less. Alright. So euphotic zone is going to be, it receives maximum light above light compensation point. Okay. Next, dysphotic zone. Dysphotic zone is going to be a part where the light intensity now starts to reduce, but it has not become completely dark as well. So we can call it the twilight zone. Okay, see here, it receives light at or below light compensation point. Hence we call it the twilight zone. Finally, coming to the profundal zone. Profundal zone, here there is no light present. Light is completely absent. Okay, and last is benthic zone. It is the bottom of the pond. So here in the benthic zone, it is the bottom zone where there is perpetual darkness, complete darkness. No light is ever going to penetrate. Alright, so these are the various zones in the lake according to the light intensity received, and accordingly there will be productivity seen in the pond or the lake. Alright, so that much regarding light. Next, let us discuss water. Now, regarding water, all of you know very well that water is so very important for sustenance of life, isn't it? Life without water is not possible for any organism, right? So in that case, so understanding how water can be playing an important role in the life of an organism is very obvious, isn't it? So these are certain important points for you to remember, like life originated in water, and that's why it cannot sustain without water. Around 90% of our protoplasm is water. So we are finally made up of water itself. It covers more than 71% of the surface of Earth in the form of various water bodies, and it is limited in the desert, and because of that itself, desert organisms on the other hand, they will show various types of adaptations to save water or to prevent loss of water, right? Be it plant or be it organisms. Also, in case, suppose if you are thinking that only desert organisms will have certain kind of problems related to water, so they will show certain adaptations. No, nothing like that. Even aquatic organisms who are found in abundance of water, even for them, they have to show certain adaptations because the quality of water is also important to them. So if they are not found in quality water, again, they will have to show certain kind of adaptations to survive. Now, the salt concentration of water is very important, and hence we can divide the water bodies according to their salinity or salt concentration as follows. Inland water will have less than 5 part per thousand. PPT means parts per thousand. So here the salinity level will be less than 5 PPT. Sea, here in sea the salinity will be 30 to 35 PPT. On the other hand, hypersaline lagoons will have more than 100 PPT, more than 100 parts per thousand of salinity. So it's going to be maximum saline. Alright. Now, based on the salinity tolerance, now this is very important. In this entire discussion, this is mainly what you have to remember, that just like as per temperature, we can divide the organisms into so many categories. So likewise, based on salinity tolerance also, organisms can be of two types. One is euryhaline, another is stenohaline. The meaning remains similar to eurythermal and stenothermal. Like euryhaline organisms, they can tolerate wide range of salinity. Okay, for example, salmon. And for stenohaline, they cannot tolerate wide range of salinity. They will have to remain only in a specific or a narrow range of salinity. Otherwise, they won't be able to survive. Example is shark. So that much for today's class. We discussed temperature, light and water. I hope all of you are clear about it. In the next class, we'll start with soil.